Right, okay. Hello. Today is the 27th of April, 2025. We are just a few short days away from the 1st of May local elections. My name is Ben Walker. I'm the co-founder of Britain Elects. I'm also a data journalist for the New Statesman, and full disclosure, I am a borough councillor in Chester for the Labour Party. But that doesn't get in the way of why I set up Britain Elects. I hope it's not too echoey here. I'm currently in the middle of a house move. Perfect timing. The letting agent and landlady wants me out on the 1st of May. Yep. And so I'm having to go and move somewhere else. And I'm going to be, bunking elsewhere of no fixed abode for the next few weeks, I suppose. But there we go. But anyway, look, thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to talk about the local elections on the 1st of May. These are not, compared to previous streams, compared to previous broadcasts, these are not big local elections, are they? In 2023, we had 6,000 seats up. In 2024, we had around about 3 to 4K. Now, this year, it's only 1,500. But that doesn't make them any less consequential, does it? What you have is a key by-election in Runcorn and Helsby that I've written up as perhaps directing the nature of Westminster for the next 4 years in a way parliamentary by-elections don't normally. If Reform win the Runcorn and Helsby by-election, that is saying to 100 to 200 Labour MPs, if Reform can win there, they can win here. And you can imagine what the response will be down in Westminster, how overreactive it will be. Blue Labour, the faction in the party that is a bit more socially conservative than the party median, will become the norm at party conference, not the exception. That is what could be a consequence of a Reform win in Runcorn and Helsby, and overcompensation. But anyway, the rest of the elections, 1,500 seats in much of Shire England, which is, county councils, the parts of England, frankly, that were very, very blue in... should we have a look at them? That were very blue in 2021. What you're seeing here are the county elections, the unitary elections that will be held on the 1st of May. These are the seats. These seats were last up in 2021, my first election, UK election for the New Statesman. And look at them. Look how blue they are. Just consider, though, most of these areas are now represented by a non-Conservative MP. Much of northern Kent, Dartford, Gravesham, all around here, all of this is represented by a Labour MP. Doesn't look like it, does it? Doesn't look like it. But there we go. What about Cambridgeshire? South Cambridgeshire already saw some big Lib Dem gains a few years ago, and they have Lib Dem MPs now. But you're going to need to see that furthered, fattened, so to speak. Same with Oxfordshire. Most of Oxfordshire now is not represented by a Conservative MP. Ditto Gloucestershire. Ditto Staffordshire. Look at this, Staffordshire. It is just a sea of Tory blue with the exception of, what's this? Stafford proper, Stafford Central. Yeah. The rest, all represented by Labour MPs. So we should expect Labour gains, right? Well, maybe not. But first of all, let's move to the opinion polls. What's happening? What's happening right now? Well, we are in abnormal times. The most popular party in the country is on 25% of the projected vote. That is not normal. We are a first-past-the-post democracy, or supposedly. Normally, parties are on 30-something%. David Cameron's Conservatives were always hovering around between a third and 40%. During the coalition years, Labour was hovering around a third and 40% during the coalition years. The Lib Dems were very much firmly in single figures, and UKIP were eking out leads over the Lib Dems in third place. Now we have a Reform lead, the radical right, the far right, if you want to call them that. They have a 2-point lead over Labour, 25.2% if an election was held today, 23.6% for Labour. Labour are down 11 points already on what happened on the 4th of July last year. The Conservatives are also down on where they were on the 4th of July. If you thought things were bad for the Tories last year, just wait till this year. They're on 21.8% down, minus 2 point down, 2.6 points. Labour are down 11, and their Reform are up 10.5. The Lib Dems are, they often get a little polling boost in the run-up to the local elections. They're up 1.4 points now, sitting on 14%. But they were, what's the word? They were above water, so to speak. They were above where they were in 2024, on the 4th of July, last year as well. So, though they're getting a little boost for the locals, as they would, they overperform in local elections compared to their national polling position. They were also polling above what they got in December, in January and February. Greens are up 2 points. They're sitting on 9%. And others, which includes the Scottish Nationalists, Welsh Nationalists and other parties and non-parties, are on 6%. That's only down half a point. Normally, this sort of stuff would get squeezed in favour of the more official opposition parties, the insurgent parties. So it's interesting to see that is not getting squeezed as much as it is. If you're interested in the other parts of the UK, go to Scotland here. Look at this. The SNP have returned to having a lead over Labour. This is more down to Labour fall than SNP rise. Look at that. The SNP are up 1.4 points. They're sitting on 31%. Labour are on 23%. Their win, I suppose, in Scotland was very much short-lived. Their fall from grace in Scotland is bigger, fatter and faster than it is across Great Britain. And here's the interesting thing. In Scotland, you have Reform polling 15%. Once upon a time, there was this idea that Scotland was immune to the radical right, to the far right. Those days are long gone. Those were UKIP days. UKIP was seen as an English party. Reform doesn't really have that, even though it's the same people, isn't it? For them to sit on 15% is, I have to say, interesting. Who is it coming from? Well, I think it's coming from all over. There's a lot of churn happening there, but it's definitely coming from Labour as well. The Tories are in 4th place in Scotland. They're in 3rd place across Great Britain, 4th place in Scotland, sitting around doing nothing there. Let's look at Wales. You can find all this on BritainElects.com, by the way, which is updated. I only updated it a few days ago. Welsh Labour still has a lead in Wales, 30% down, 7 points. Reform are up 6 points. They are a firm second. And the Tories are, well, they're not up, they're not down. They're just standing still. Plaid Cymru, Party of Wales, Welsh Nationalists, they're up 1 point, they're on 16%, and the smaller parties. The Greens have 5%. I find that interesting because you often see the Greens as very much an English party. Well, you often see the Green Party of England and Wales as very much an English party. They have a disproportionate number of councillors in England relative to Wales, but for them to stay on around 5% is interesting. Might get them a few seats in the Senedd if it stays like that in a year's time. You're able to find all of this on BritainElects.com, and it's interesting stuff. Also worth looking at is which party does this country trust on the matter of the economy? And the answer is neither of you. 53% of this country does not know who to trust between Labour or the Conservatives on the issue of the economy. It's either don't know or neither of you. And of those with an opinion, with a firm opinion, the Conservatives have a lead. They've reclaimed their lead with a 1 point lead over Labour. The Conservatives are trusted by 24% of the country on the matter of the economy. That's down 3 points on the 2024 election. Labour are on 23% for their trust on the economy. That is down an eye-watering, a heartbreaking 18 points for them. And when you chart it down here, just look at that. Labour finished up the 2024 campaign with 41% of Britons trusting them on the economy, which is interesting because that's the similar percentage who said they were going to vote for them, but we know that wasn't borne out. It might be worth considering the issue, the number that trust you on the economy perhaps being the ceiling in some cases, or whatever. They came in July. They made some decisions. I think it's around about here that they made a decision on winter fuel payments, and you see a slightly steeper drop by October It continues dropping, and it just hasn't abated. It hasn't abated at all. I suppose it rose a little bit there in March. There was a slight bounce for incumbents, small bounce, but it was noted, a small bounce for incumbents after the inauguration of Donald Trump. You're seeing that on a more dramatic scale in Canada, in Australia, in Mexico. Here in Britain, it was very much muted, but in terms of trust, those who you know, just a little one for the government, but it was so short-lived. It's frankly non-existent. But right now, the Conservatives have reclaimed their lead on the economy, but truly, it doesn't really look like a lead, does it? The Conservatives have barely recovered any polling position with the public. Rather, this is very much Labour's fall as opposed to Tory rise. What else can we look at? Let's just go back to the polls for 1 minute, because you have Reform ahead. The radical right, the party, the insurgent right, the one claiming to break the uni-party, so to speak, break the wheel, as Daenerys Targaryen once wanted to do until the series turned bad. They are ahead of both Labour and the Conservatives. But something to consider is this. Let's just scroll up here. When it comes to trust on the cost of living and jobs and unemployment, the Conservatives still have a slim advantage over Reform. On issues of jobs and unemployment, Reform have a 5-point advantage over Reform. This is from some More in Common polling from last year. It's fair to say that on the issue of the economy, the Tories just about still have an advantage over Reform. That doesn't stop, however, Reform having a lead in the opinion polls. Now, what is driving this? There is some uncertainty here. First of all, the most popular party being on 25%, again, to reiterate, is not normal. Every opportunity I get, I say, that is 4 points below where Gordon Brown got in 2010, and he was defeated. And we covered that as a round rejection of the new Labour government. Quite rightly, of course. Now the most popular party is on 25%. That's not normal. But what is driving this? And this is what adds to a load of uncertainty here. So this is some data from January. The overall numbers, polling numbers, haven't changed that much. Okay, in January it was something like Reform 26%. Now it's Reform, what was it again? 25%. Not much difference here, and the narrative hasn't changed, so to speak. But what's driving Reform's vote gain is less so transfers from the Conservatives and Labour, and you see that here with this Sankey chart. I hope we all know how to interpret this. It's coming overwhelmingly from those that did not vote in the last election. People who did not vote in the last election, when you ask them now, are you voting? Yes. And of those who say yes, who are you voting for? It seems as though just a majority, I think it's 44%, say they would go for Reform. Of those who are voting, so what's this? 3 million non-voters in 2024 now say they would turn out for Reform. That compares to about 1.5 million for the Tories and 1.1 million for Labour. How about other insurgents? 500,000 for the Greens. Lib Dems. Yeah, Lib Dems are turning out as many non-voters as the Greens. Interesting. That's what is driving Reform's lead primarily. Non-voters now saying they will vote. The unreliable voters, because they don't vote, now being relied on to get Reform its wins. It's a risky strategy. In fact, I will be minded to say non-voters now saying they're turning out is a bit, I just wouldn't believe it. But it is being borne out in council by-elections. You're seeing council by-elections where Reform is performing up to expectations. You have this account on Twitter, X on Twitter, called, I think it's Reform Exposed or something to that effect. And they always talk about, there's been X hundred council by-elections and Reform have only won 15 to 20 or whatever of them. And I think you're completely missing the point. When you model what these numbers would mean in a general election, and you get it by ward, and you compare it to council by-elections, Reform is performing as expected, really. These non-voters turning out, these new voters turning up on the scene, is happening. It's happening. it's odd. And it's happening in council by-elections. Yes, council by-elections turn out 15, 20, 25%. But, there's some good studies out there which show, low turnout, high turnout, it is broadly a decent reflection of the public opinion on the ground. Okay? Just bear that in mind. What's happening to Labour's base? You're seeing some transfers all over. How many hundreds of thousands to the Greens? I think that's a few 100,000 to the Greens. But what is really illustrating Labour's fall from grace is 2.1 million of its base. Once you add up all the people moving away, by the way, that's practically half of Labour's base have now moved somewhere other than Labour. But 2.1 million of them now say they don't know or they're not voting. That is a quick, fast and loose fall from grace for the government of the day. How many are going back to the Conservatives? A few 100,000. Frankly, that's very slim. But something to bear in mind is when we go to these numbers, who do you trust with the economy? I haven't shown it here on the website. I will do later. But you have around about 50% of the 2024 Labour base saying they trust Labour with the economy now. And then you have around 5 to 9% of the base saying they would trust the Conservatives with the economy. So you're seeing some movement there. You're seeing some transfers there. I think there was a question here I wanted to look at. Let's just have a look at this. So if Labour do overcompensate in reaction to the local election results, as you say, it will be interesting to see how much or if at all such reaction feeds into next year's strategy in the Senate elections. That's an interesting one from Matt F there. I don't know what overcompensation is for Labour. The simple truth is, let's just go back to these elections. They were last up in 2021. What is Labour overcompensating? I'll be honest with you. I think the best thing Labour can do is stand still in the net numbers. They're going to make losses in Doncaster, be it up against Reform or up against independent candidates. Durham is a complete slugfest here. You have all sorts. You have Bishop Auckland. Where's Bishop Auckland? It's just a bit over here. Yep. Yeah, Bishop Auckland there. Apparently looking very good for Reform. You have North Durham around here with Chester Le Street and others and Consett. Apparently all this is looking very good for Reform. Some of this was Labour long ago. I don't know if it tells us. No, it doesn't tell us. I've tried estimating the previous seat history of these new boundaries, and it's tough. It's tough. But some of these areas that Labour lost in 2021 should be coming back to Labour in a straight Conlab fight. But Reform are getting in there, are probably taking the seats off Labour's expectant hands. And then you also have independent candidates spoiling the narrative as well. What's happening there? But anyway, shall we have a look at this map? Finley Hannon on Twitter asks, what about the Gaza vote? Will that have an impact on Thursday? I think it could, yes. So the Gaza vote, God, that's such a debased way to talk about it. The vote amongst a great portion of Britain's Asian/Muslim population that is particularly focused on the issue of Israel and Palestine. What we saw last year completely blew me out of the water. It did. These independent candidates, these who are very, what would you call it? Most, campaigning pro-Palestinian candidates, they are outperformed in places like Blackburn, in Batley, in Leicester, and a whole host of other places, and did much better than even I expected. And I did expect some backlash. I expected it particularly in Oldham, Rochdale, particularly George Galloway doing well, but they did over and above. And I put it to you that when we go back to these numbers, that 6% for others, I think it's fair to say that Labour has not repaired its relations with Britain's Muslim community yet. There's still more work to do. And I put it to you as well, that if an election was held now on these numbers, right now, what is it? Half a dozen MPs, half a dozen pro-Palestine independents. I think that could double, if not triple. You'd have places like Ilford, Wes Streeting would be in trouble if an election was held now. You'd have the rest of parts of Birmingham, Shabana Mahmood, also in Birmingham, Jess Phillips. These big beasts, Shabana Mahmood being, of course, the Justice Secretary, she'll be in serious trouble if an election was held now. And I don't think those what do you want to call it, race relations? Those relations with different communities have necessarily been repaired between Labour and them yet, and there's a lot to do. And a place like Blackburn, as you're seeing here, which is not having an election, it could be a bonfire for Labour next year when the elections are held there. Now, just to answer the question, Findlay, sorry, what about the Gaza vote? Will that have an impact on Thursday? It will, yes. Burnley, the southern and western portion of it is very, very white. So think about the green area here. Burnley Central West, quite white. Burnley Rural, Southwest, and Padiham, which once had a UKIP councillor in 2017. This is the pretty white portion. And then the Asian portion is more so going up here into Briarfield and Burnley North East. And what I'm expecting to see around here, particularly with Nelson, is those independents, those pro-Gaza independents do very, very well indeed. It's these seats, Nelson East, Briarfield and Nelson West. Look at that, with a Labour on 56% in 2021. You're going to probably see a pro-Palestine independent do very well indeed. It's just, you got to bear in mind, they also come with a very socially conservative bent. I think when some people in the media, particularly in London, write these up as, blah, 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 progressives eke out Labour. No, it's not progressive. It's pretty conservative if you actually bother to visit these areas. It's a different world there. The random 894 says, if Labour aggressively chases the Gaza vote, wouldn't they lose more than non-Muslim votes to right-wing parties? Well, I don't think Palestine is as big an issue amongst white Britons as people want it to be. I think by and large, a slim plurality of Britons look upon the issue, and are uncomfortable to have an opinion. You know, when you ask Britons the question, which side do you sit on, Israel or Palestine, a slim plurality will say Palestine, but it's not. You know, it's similar to this. You know, slim plurality for Palestine, a notable number for Israel, but the overwhelming number would be neither, or I don't want to have an opinion, okay? That's where most of the country sits. So I think, you know, if Labour dresses up, you know, a recognition of Palestine, moves to condemn Israel and do a whole host of other things, I don't think it will necessarily cost voters. But anyway, where do I expect independents to be strong in this year? Well, wherever there's a Muslim population, I think there could be, absolutely. I think here, just north of Nottingham, is Ashfield. This is going to get very interesting. You have the independent group, the Ashfield Independents, in places like Sutton in Ashfield, Kirkby in Ashfield. You know, look, they were winning 58% last time, 60% last time. Reform are in it now to win it, and I have to say, I can't really say with certainty what's going to happen here. The Ashfield Independents have a long history of winning of elections, Hucknall as well. Is it going to stay like that? Is it going to stay like that with Reform? This is the thing. You go all the way up to Durham as well. You have independents here. They share their votes with Reform. If it's the case that these independents put in good performances and Reform put in good performances as well, they're sharing the votes, they're splitting the vote, and who's winning? Is it Labour? Is it the Conservatives? Is it the traditional party, so to speak? Don't know yet. We really don't know. That's going to be very interesting. Will there be a bonfire of the independents? Many commentators have predicted a bonfire of independent candidates. Stephen Bush of the Financial Times said it many years ago. It is never borne out to be reality. It's never ever borne out to be a reality. You might have it in a place like Cornwall. I understand in Cornwall the Lib Dems don't have the strength they used to have long ago. And I don't think they're putting up much of an effort this year. Maybe in a case like that, you'll see Lib Dem seats fall in Cornwall to the independents. Don't know. Because what you're going to definitely see is in places like Devon, Wiltshire, remainder of Oxfordshire, maybe Warwickshire as well, Gloucestershire. You're going to see the Lib Dems put in much better performances because these areas, Devizes in Wiltshire, These areas are now represented by Lib Dem MPs. Oh, I don't know about Devizes. Is Devizes represented? I'm not sure. But you get the point I'm trying to make here. Southern County England has Lib Dem MPs. But in the county council contest, they're few and far between. You have Cambridge Sharks, which are, yes, exceptions to the rule. You're going to see advances here. Almost all of this is represented by a non-Conservative MP. You're going to have parts of Borehamwood here. Yeah, they already started voting Labour. I remember this is a high Jewish population in Borehamwood South. And I remember writing back in 2021, Labour's gain here did represent a slow recovery of support amongst Britain's Jewish community. Here as well, of course, North Hertfordshire, big tight fights here. Look at that, Letchworth North, Labour 46%, Conservative 45%. That's a tight fight. And I don't know. It's not a no. Is it a no-hoper? I don't know. Maybe Reform will take Tory votes and Labour will hold on. We don't know. But then again, you've got to bear in mind, Hitchin Rural. Who's this represented by? Who's the MP here? I'm going to find that out in advance of election day. That's going to be very interesting to know indeed. And then you have here, Wellingborough, Kettering, now represented by Labour MPs. Where is the Labour councillor in the area? They're non-existent. They're not there. That's the interesting thing. We've got to bear that in mind. Now, something to know about these elections. We all like to say we're going to stay up all night on Thursday night. But unfortunately, this might be the first election where most of the counts, the vast majority of the counts, will not take place on the night, but actually the day after, Friday. I'm trying to count the number of authorities that will be counting on the night. So you'll have Northumberland, and the first seat to declare on the night of 2021 was this one, Kitty Booster, which was a Tory gain from Labour. New boundaries, different wards now. I know they're called divisions, but I'm using wards for the sake. We know Northumberland is counting. We know, I think, the Tamworth and Litch Vegas parts of Staffordshire are counting. Again, new boundaries, hard to tell, where the votes are moving. We know bits of Lincolnshire are voting. Boston and Skeg Vegas are going to be having elections. Look at that. Boston North, Tories 52% last time. Labour very distant second on 19. I don't think it's going to look that way, is it? In a few days' time. I think it's fair to say that Reform, if they don't win this, well, what are they doing? But here's the thing, this is what the polls are saying right now in Lincolnshire, or rather Greater Lincolnshire, which includes Grimsby and Scunthorpe. It looks like Andrea Jenkins, the Dame Andrea Jenkins, the Reform candidate, looks set to win Lincolnshire. You have one poll from YouGov putting them ahead by, 13 points, 15 points? And then you have another poll putting them ahead by 3 points. It really is a tough fight. And you're going to have a lot of posh Labour voters in parts of around Lincoln and, Grantham, even though Grantham isn't represented by a Labour councillor anymore. Although just note this, Grantham South, look at that. 2013 it went Labour. You're going to have a lot of Labour voters in places like this asking themselves, who do I want, a Tory mayor or a Reform mayor? And you might see some tactical voting there. That is what brings us to Runcorn and Helsby. So let's just talk about that for a hot minute. So Runcorn and Helsby is a pretty big constituency. It's 2/3 of this, 2/3 Runcorn, and then you go through Frodsham and Helsby, and you include this little estate of Elton here, which is near the Stanlow refinery, a lot of industry here, and you get all the way to the edge of Mickle Trafford, Guildon Sutton, Great Barrow, Ashton Hayes, and that's the constituency. And it's a tight fight for Reform. We don't know whether Reform are going to win it. We don't really know yet. Let me just go back to the map, because I just want to show you something here. I had a forecast, a Britain Elects forecast out. When did I put it out? I think it was about a month ago, 2 months ago, I suppose, in Runcorn and Helsby. And it gave Labour a lead of, what was it? Can anyone remember? It was 3 points, a Labour lead of 3 points if an election was held today in Runcorn and Helsby. That was a few weeks, if not months ago. Now, Now, I have a forecast out tomorrow. It was meant to go out last week, but you know how editing can be like. I had a forecast out tomorrow, which will tell you what. What will it say in Runcorn and Helsby? Will it be a Reform gain, or will it be a Labour hold? Let's just put this back. Let's just put this on the screen on my Substack. This is what my forecast said a few weeks ago. Labour 33%, Reform 30%, Conservative 20%, Green 8%, Lib Dem 5%. What's happening now? Well, first of all, the Tories are up 4 points on where they were in 2024. It's fair to say there's going to be some tactical voting here. Who between Labour and Reform do you want Tory voters? We don't really know that yet, do we? That's going to be very interesting to see. And I tell you this, I'll give you a little clue now. There's a lot of squeeze in this vote. The Tory vote is going to be squeezed quite heavily in Runcorn and Helsby. When you look at the constituency, you can see it here. This is what the Britain Predicts modelling was saying in Runcorn and Helsby. Runcorn should vote Reform, but the rest won't. So you have Runcorn proper, Grange Ward, Western Ward, Nortons. The Nortons, they should probably vote Reform. Labour might lose those areas to Reform. And let's just bear in mind, this is Halton. This is Halton Council, which is like 80% Labour in most elections. And then you have Daresbury, which is a little bit more new build estate. And that still has a strong Reform vote there, but maybe Labour can hold on there. Meanwhile, in Frodsham, in the Sandstone Trail, in Elton, Helsby, Reform's vote is a little more, what could I say, a little less prevalent. And it's worth bearing in mind a Conservative councillor representing the bits on here called Elton and Stoke, though it is called the Gowie Rural Ward. I call it the Gowie Villages. It's just a load of villages near Chester and Ellesmere Port. One of the Conservative councillors for this area defected to Reform. His name's Graham Heatley. I know him. He's on the council. And let me put it this way. This is not the most Reform-friendly part of the constituency. His defection, I think, may what's the word? May prove counterproductive. It might not be what will suit him. I don't think he would win. Put bluntly, I think in Gowie Rural Ward, the votes will go Conservative or Labour, and then Labour or Conservative for second place, and then Reform for third place. I think the Runcorn and Helsby constituency is not appreciated as being, frankly, 2 seats, which brings us to, if I can just get it up here, an Ashcroft poll, because Lord Ashcroft did his own numbers not so very long ago. Let me see if we can get it up here. Lord Ashcroft did a poll which put Reform ahead by, I think it was about 6-8 points. But bear this in mind, the Ashcroft poll sample, where did it focus on? Do you want me to, should we just get that map back again? So look here, just remember where Reform's strength is. Reform's strength is in Runcorn, Weston, Bridgewater, Daresbury, etc., the Nortons. And when you look at that, where is the poll oversampling? Runcorn. Where is it undersampling? Gowie, Helsby, Sandstone. And where's that? The southern bits. The not-so-Reform friendly bits. So I think when we give coverage to polls like this, we kind of need to pour a ton of cold water over it, because that's not helpful. That's not, it's bad use of data. It's poor data. When you recalibrate it, which is what I tried to do, it gave Reform a lead of 3 points. So the Ashcroft poll, when you properly sample it, assuming the gradient in the poll is the same as this, the gradient of where Reform support truly lies, it gives Reform a lead of 3 points, that Ashcroft poll. My model back then gave Reform a lead of, gave Labour a lead of 3 points. So, when we consider that, just 20 minutes walk away from me, Runcorn and Helsby, not very good. Not a very good poll. And it looks like Labour is in serious trouble there. You'll be able to find what the Britain Predicts model says tomorrow over at the New Statesman. So, lots of elections. Should we talk about some of the seats? I won't be with you too much for long. I've got to go shower soon. I've got a lot to do today. I've got a lot of packing to do. I'm still in my house move. Look at this seat here. Let me see if I can just move this down a bit. No. Can we do that? No, we'll work with that now anyway. Okay, fine. Ramsgate in Kent. Look at this. It had a UKIP history in 2013 during UKIP's big year. It went Labour in 2017, one of those rare Labour gains in the 2017 local elections, and since went to the Tories, and not by much. Look at that. Tories, 1/3 of the vote. Labour, 30% of the vote. Greens, 27% of the vote. This has a strong UKIP history. It would be very poor. Let's be frank. This would probably vote Reform in a few days' time. If it votes Green, don't know. That's going to be very interesting. But this tells you something about where the Greens get some of their votes from. Big Green vote here, 27% here. If Reform wasn't a factor, if the radical right wasn't a force in British politics, if it wasn't polling on 25%, you'd have the Greens talking to voters who Reform would often win around, and they would be winning them around themselves. This idea the Greens are just a party confined to the permanently online, the pink-haired, and so on and so forth, is very much a caricature, not representative. And I put it to activists of the Greens to appreciate that your appeal, you are an anti-establishment party, or try to appeal as one, and your vote is as a consequence. And you might be picking up people who don't mind Nigel Farage. Something to bear in mind there. Just moving further up on the Isle of Thanet, Broadstairs, where Ted Heath was from. This is the more posh bit of the Isle of Thanet. This is where UKIP very much struggled in. You could probably end up with a scenario where the Tory vote crashes and maybe Labour gets through the middle there. Hard to say. What about here? Cliftonville, again, another posh bit. Hard to say what happens there. Margate, Labour just by the skin of their teeth. Strong history of Labour, though. That's going to be interesting whether Reform get it. What about Canterbury? Labour held on to the more central urban bits of their constituencies in 2021, but if they want to show that they are holding on to places that they won in the general election, they need to show effort here. Gravesend, Dartford, and look at it, it's already a tough fight here. Northfleet, Gravesend West, Tories 42%, Labour 41%. That's tough. That's going to be a tight fight for them. It was Labour in 2013. Bits of Dartford here, Dartford West. Ooh, maybe. Who knows? That'll be interesting. Dartford East, Residents Group proving a spoiler party here. What about you go down to the royal borough of Tunbridge Wells? Where's Tunbridge Wells? Have I missed it? There it is. Right. Look at that. Lib Dems should be pretty happy here. They should be aiming for that. That's going to be very interesting indeed. Tunbridge Wells East, ditto as well. Because I just got a question from Kent Elect. Shall we look at this? Shall we get some of the things in? If you're able to look beyond the comments from Real European Patriot having a rant about trans-loving Marxist. Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Kent Alex asks, will the Lib Dems do well in Kent, in Tunbridge Wells and Sevenoaks? I think it's fair to say that's going to happen. Let's just go back to the map here. Yeah, look at that. You can see Lib Dems in pole position to win these seats. You add in Reform as a spoiler, then maybe it is all but confirmed for the Lib Dems. But something you've got to bear in mind, Reform's appeal often is everyone but the incumbent party. So in a place maybe like Suffolk, I know Suffolk's not having elections this year because they're going the devolution route, but if you end up in a situation where Reform stood in the parts of Suffolk the Greens do well in, I bet you, some of those green wards we see, some of those green council seats we see might not be won by the Greens. The Reformers may take some of their votes. Something to bear in mind there, that Reform's appeal is anti-establishment. It takes the people who are not the establishment, who are not the incumbent. And I would put it to you, perhaps, that maybe in the royal town of Tunbridge Wells, Reform will take in some of the anti-incumbent, anti-Tory votes. But then again, maybe Reform is too right-wing for that. What else do we need to look at around here? I think we've done Kent. It's just going to get messy. Hertfordshire, I think we've appreciated. This is where Lib Dems are gunning for something. Tories might try to eke out some gains of Labour here. It's tough. Letchworth North, maybe. Hitchin North, who knows? Hitchin Rural, I understand the Greens are targeting. Someone said that in the comments section. Thank you very much for that. Makes sense. Greens 22%, Tories 48%. Goodness me. You know how the Greens act. And yeah. But anyway, what else? There was a question here. Anything on the Metro Mayors? Greens looking interesting in the West of England one. Yes. I wish I could show you the polls, actually. Let me see if I can do that. Let me just do some tabs out. So, no, I won't. I'll put this up on the screen. So, the West of England, as you know, is Bristol, North East Somerset, Bath, and other bits around it. I don't often touch the South. I don't go there, basically. I stay in the north. And let's just get the polls up here. Right, so if we just scroll down and look at these, this is what's very exciting. First of all, we have 2 polls, and I'm delighted they are telling a different story. Look at these. So you have one poll putting the Greens ahead by 4 points on 27%. And then you have another poll putting the Greens Greens behind by 5 points, with Labour ahead by 2 points. So who's ahead, really? And by the way, the More in Common poll, and I'm absolutely delighted pollsters are choosing to publish different numbers. The More in Common poll has the most popular party on 23%, most popular candidate on 23%, and the YouGov poll has the most popular candidate on 27%. And Charles Brewer Agency just on Twitter commented, political history is less relevant in this round of elections than in over a century. Now, I couldn't agree more, because what you're seeing here is probably what you'll see across a lot of England in a few days' time, which is the party that winning with less than 30% of the vote. That's the exciting bit. It's also absolutely traumatizing if you're a candidate. You don't know, basically. Every vote will count. Squeeze matters here. Matt F. asked, what impact do you think the voting system change from the mayoral election will have on the results? Well, first past the post, that's it. I'll put it to you as well. Right now, Reform are on course to win 2 mayoralties, which is Lincolnshire, or Greater Lincolnshire. Just call it Lincolnshire. It's Lincolnshire, North Lincolnshire is in Lincolnshire. It's not Greater. Absolutely irritating, and then Hull and East Yorks. And I have to say, if it was held on, second preferences, 2 round, I don't think Reform would win. I think they might eke a lead in Lincolnshire, but I think they would lose in Hull and East Yorkshire, because second preferences, who those progressive voters rally around to beat Reform, would be killer for them. What this voting reform change, what this change in the voting system by the Tories has done, is make Reform wins all the more viable. It would have made Tory wins more viable had the right-wing vote not been split. And I suppose it heralds faster in some parts, like Lincolnshire, their death. If you have a Reform county council, which is what one poll in Lincolnshire is suggesting, because you had one poll of the mayoralty in Lincolnshire putting Reform ahead by 13 points. If that was bored out across Lincolnshire County Council, that would be a Reform County Council, almost certainly. That's what we're up against. But the number poll put Reform ahead by 3 points, so it's a bit more murky. But if you have situations like that, that cements, I suppose, Reform in Boston and Skegness. But it also cements them in a place like here, which is Louth and Horn Council, or is it Louth? I don't know. Do apologise to everyone from Lincolnshire for my mispronunciation. But you have possible Reform advance elsewhere. Ditto, South Holland and the Deepings, which is, Spalding, That's what we're up against. These elections validate or invalidate Reform as a serious option in places like Lincolnshire, in places like Durham, in places like Doncaster, in places like the, the South Lancashire strip of Accrington, of Burnley, of Pendle. You know, this is going to be very tough stuff. Accrington West, look at that. Labour, 49%. Tories, 45%. Tough fight for Labour. Adding Reform could be a big spoiler. Oswald Whistle, how do you pronounce it? Tories, 55%. Labour, 36%. Great Harwood, Rishton, Clayton Lemoors. Ooh, look at that. Tories 39, Labour 38. Add in Reform, what does that do? Where do Reform take their votes from in a place like this? Do they come through the middle? Who knows? Who knows? I'm on the local Facebook group for this, Hindburn Chat, and the number of people posting Reform is... It's insane. It's insane. You look into some of their accounts, they're not from the area, but it's interesting stuff. Lancaster... What's going to happen here? The Greens have strength in Lancaster Central, the more studenty bit. But what about Lancaster East? Strong Green vote there. Skirton, not much of a Green vote. You're going to see some Green gains here. You're going to see Lancaster proper vote Green. Don't know. What about the surrounds of Morecambe? That's going to be interesting, that. It's going to be really, really interesting. So, lots to get through here. And to be honest with you, I wish I could be here all day. But... I have a lot to do. I have a busy day. So, and maybe I'll just take a few questions. Well, Votes Count asks, with 5 parties capable of winning seats plus ins and locals, will most of the 23 councils end up being no overall control? I think that's fair to say. I think that's absolutely fair to say. You have, how many of these are Conservative-led? The majority? The vast majority? How many of these will be hung? How many of these will be very hung? I think it's fair to say most of them. Most of them. You're gonna end up in situations where you have less of this and more of this. Absolute chaos. You know, when I was trialing this map, I put in some random results. I did equals rand between a few hundred votes, and it gave a load of results. It was absolutely interesting, and it looked chaotic. And I'll be honest with you, this is what I expect. I think it's going to be absolutely chaotic on the 1st of May, and I can't wait to see it. And I think none of you can either. Terence Price says Accrington, Chorley and Lancaster seems to be a big green focus in Lancashire. Don't know about Accrington. Accrington, does it really have much of a green strength? Interesting. Lancaster, absolutely. Chorley, which is all of this, isn't it? Which is Euxton. It's currently a two-way between Labour and the Tories. Let's see how the Greens do well there. But in the north of England, yes, I can definitely see around Lancaster. What they do in Durham, maybe they eat into the Lib Dem vote in Durham proper. Not sure, you know, like how when you try to beat Lib Dems in council elections, you best not miss, and most parties do miss unless the Lib Dems get into government. Lib Dems need to show strength in a place like here. Oh, sorry, I need to be showing this, not my face. North Shropshire, place like here. Oswestry, yes, they have a bit of a green vote here in Oswestry, but they need to be... Lib Dems need to be showing strength here as well. Where the Lib Dems won parliamentary seats, and it's a lot more than this, they need to be picking up the council game. They need to be picking up the council contests. But yeah, look, I think we should end it here, because this is the last stream I'll be doing in this house, in this room, and I'm going to be moving soon. I might do a stream where I'm staying next. I haven't got my house yet. I'm still waiting on the solicitors to do their mortgage thing. I got the eviction a few months ago from the landlady, and I thought, absolutely, F this, I'm going to go and get my own place. And I've got a flat on shared ownership, and I was surprised I could afford it. So I'm going to do that. So I might do a stream on the day of the vote or after. We'll see. Heros Knight says, I think the Greens did well in Accrington in the GE, but wasn't there last-minute problems in the local Labour Party led to closer than expected result? Yeah, in Accrington they parachuted a candidate in as their MP, and I think it may have cost them a lot of votes. Yeah. Heros Knight makes this point, and I'll just... let me show you this. Wait a minute. Does it? I'm doing the right thing. Yeah. Okay. Heros Knight says, this might also be the local elections where a large amount of paper candidates get elected by accident. Absolutely. Without a doubt. I don't know what else to say. That's what we're expecting. In 2013, a UKIP candidate in Surrey won by accident. he was on holiday and he didn't expect to win. I imagine we're going to see a lot of that. So campaigners, organisers, when you are picking paper candidates, I think you need to warn them now. You might win. Unless you're Labour, I suppose. Anyway, look, listen, I think that concludes the stream for now. I've done about half an hour, 40 minutes. I've got a lot to do today. I've got some more packing to do. And I will see you another time. I'm delighted. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for the comments. I hope you enjoyed this. This is going to appear on YouTube. It's on Twitter. I might put this on Substack, but I need to broaden where we stream to. If you like what I've had to say, you can subscribe to BritainElects on BritainElects.com. There's a Substack there. I send out irregular missives of data. You'll be able to find this map that you've just seen on the New Statesman website. Google New Statesman Ben Walker, and you'll find it under Reform's Make or Break Elections. What else? You can find me on BNH Walker on Twitter and bwalker.uk on Blue Sky, which is the new Twitter, or is trying to be. Well, it's the new Twitter for lefties, isn't it? And that pretty much is it. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in another one. All right then. So long. Bye-bye.